Hello, this is Ukraine on Air and another issue of Expert Talks. Today we have a special guest, Hanna Shelest, who's the Director of Security Programs at Foreign Policy Council, Ukrainian Prism, and she's also an Editor-in-Chief in Ukraine Analytica magazine. Hello, Hanna. So, Hanna, as far as I know, the negotiations which were held in Istanbul are over now, and there are lots of different rumors around those negotiations. How do you estimate the results, at least the ones which were made public by both sides?
You're absolutely right. There were more rumors than information about the talks, and we heard quite a big set of the so-called proposals or the negotiation positions after these 3 hours talks. What is really interesting that it's been announced that negotiations can take place for 2 days. As a result, they've been only 3 hours, and that's also raised the questions. So were they successful or not, or were there just the process of presenting certain proposals that should be negotiated at least in Moscow by the Russian side, or that is already certain agreements reached? So that this problem that we have more questions than answers, that's probably the biggest issue about these negotiations. I can't say that they are over, because nothing been agreed. And so that's been mostly the mid positions. Our delegation, Ukrainian delegation, has definitely announced that it was a big breakthrough comparing to the previous Russian proposals. But at the same time, we see that too many questions raised rose among the Ukrainian expert community. First of all, one of the reasons because of these rumors more than the information. And the second very interesting development that we already heard quite a serious opposition to these things from the Russian population side. We searched the Russian social networks and we realized that they are even more unsatisfied with the proposals than the Ukrainian public opinion.
I guess there was just the wrong perception among the Russian population, as if they are winning, as if they are taking all of the possible front lines, and that is why they were hoping that they can tolerate more, as they said, before the closure of the conflict, of the war, in fact. But let us come back maybe a bit to the moral part of this question. How can we make any deals with an aggressor country? Because we know this widely spread notion, never make any negotiations with a terrorist. Do you consider Russian state as a terrorist, and how do we make any deals with them?
Definitely, a lot of actions of the Russian Federation can be considered as a terrorist attacks, or at least the governmental sponsored terrorism. And we know that one of the Ukraine against Russia cases in the International Court of Justice is exactly according to the Convention on Terrorism. That's like back from 2014 activities. But if we speak about negotiations as so, we should be realistic. Each conflict, each war always had a process of negotiation between the conflicting parties. Even if one party is the open aggressor, that is just a reality. That's always just two ways of resolving the conflict, either total win and total lose, or some kind of negotiations. So in this way, I don't have any problems with the negotiations. Another question is that how you're coming to these negotiations. A lot of partners perceived it, I don't know why, that Ukraine need to make concessions, and usually concessions are made by those who are losing. And looking at the strategic postures, at how the military actions are happening now, we definitely cannot say that Ukraine is losing. Are we winning? That is another question, but we are definitely not in the position of those who are losing, who are not reaching our goals. That's why it seems to me that Ukraine should have a little bit more ambitious agenda during these negotiations, or at least start from less concessions towards the Russian Federation.
But we have heard from the Russian Federation as if they are trying to reduce any of the offensive from the northern part, and maybe they're just regrouping their troops to concentrate on the eastern part. That is why we need definitely some security guarantees. The security guarantees were one of the topics which were discussed at those negotiations, and we even heard the idea from the Ukrainian delegation about something similar to Article 5 of the NATO Article 5, right? And with the guarantors, the countries which could guarantee our security. How do you estimate that? Is it possible, or is it just prolonging the whole idea of negotiations?
Honestly, I still can't understand how realistic that is for realization, and just several points that that really worry me. First of all, that is the list of those who should guarantee Ukrainian security in the future. Not even speaking about what is inside. First of all, the least. Can you imagine China or Israel or even Germany really guaranteeing Ukrainian security if now these countries had such a dubious position? Also, the Russian Federation, can the aggressor guarantee your security? No, probably they can in case Ukraine lost or occupied, but not in the current conditions what we have. The second issue about the least is that we already heard from several countries like the United Kingdom, United States, that they don't know what is inside of these guarantees that are proposed. And the United Kingdom being even more open, saying that no Article 5 possible for these agreements. Article 5 is of the collective defense is just something what we have within the NATO. So it's a really very big questions for me. What is inside? How you're going to guarantee when you didn't negotiate, first of all, these conditions with the guarantors themselves? The second, when you propose too many countries with very different positions, even regarding the current situation. And then when you don't have this exhaustive list of what they're going to do. To provide the weapons and military equipment, they're already doing it. To assist with the no-fly zone, they can do it or cannot do it, depending how they would like to do. And also, you said about 3 days consultations. Sorry, but Article 5 is almost of the immediate use. Definitely, the country that is under attack should refer to the Atlantic Council. They are making decision, but as we saw it after 11th September, you needed just a few hours to make this decision. 3 days of consultations, that's already a big red flag about the realistic and predictability of implications of any of the security guarantees.
Thank you for your opinion. Honestly speaking, I totally agree with it. Still, you've mentioned about the whole geopolitical situation, and one of the most important players during those not even negotiations, because this country is not the negotiator itself, but still is playing a very important role in the international arena, is China. So do you see any changes as an expert? Do you see any changes in the position of China after the first month of the war? What's their calculus? What do they think they would change? Or maybe any of their public announcements and declarations have changed already?
We started to notice a very, very slight hope within the Chinese policies. It's still probably too early to speak, or better to say that China is not that actor that is making everything public. However, what are the good signs for Ukraine? First of all, we started to see a little bit of the change in terms of the TV coverage, of the Chinese coverage. It's not so openly and blatantly pro-Russian anymore. At least they started to show pictures of Ukraine, of the real situation. The second, we see that China rejected the possibility to openly provide Russia with the military and financial support as Russia wanted. Maybe they are providing it. There are a lot of possibilities for the covert operation, but at least they didn't make it publicly. So they didn't become ally of the Russian Federation. Point number 3 is that they started to speak a lot about the humanitarian aid, both for Ukraine and for those countries who are taking Ukrainian refugees. For example, they provided $100,000 to Chisinau just for Ukrainian refugees to assist them with the humanitarian aid. But also, it seems to me that after the round of talks between the European, American leaders and the Chinese leadership, they started to be a little bit more cautious because they realized that their trade with European Union is several times more than with Russia. The possibilities are several times more than with Russia. So that's why they don't want even indirect influence and impact of the sanctions against them, not speaking about any open sanction. At the same time, China is always, first of all, with the Chinese national interest, and their national interest to take the benefit from this situation. So we definitely would see their possibilities of buying or taking control over the certain resources or enterprises within the Russian Federation. It can temporarily help Russia, but at the same time, that's definitely not in the benefit of the Russian Federation, but just in the benefit of Beijing.
Or maybe in the benefit of the authorities, the top of the politicians. It's not in the benefit of the population. Am I right?
Yes and no, because for the population, honestly, they don't care that much about something happening outside of China. The Chinese information space is predominantly domestic concentrated. So That's why we see some of the Ukrainian activists who are now trying to penetrate the Chinese social networks in Chinese language, helping with spreading the information, but that is the drop in the ocean. And definitely we will need a little bit bigger support and bigger activities within the Chinese information space to make the population even thinking about what are the consequences of the current events.
Well, we can speak about the countries like China, who seems not to meddle in this conflict, but what about the direct mediators? For instance, Turkey. Why does Turkey has such an interesting position in the war? They decided to be the platform for mediation, and that was the first attempt from Turkey. Could you say whether it was successful or not? And who can take the same role for the future? You've already mentioned Israel, or maybe it could be Switzerland.
That is really interesting because it's not the first time that Istanbul spoke, or Ankara, that is official Ankara, spoke about the possibility of negotiations. The first attempt being a few years ago, when for the first time we said that Minsk is not a good place for the negotiations. However, at that time, the Russian Federation being against. Now Turkey again tried to be, and it seems to me they just used the opportunity because they had both very good relations with Zelensky and with Putin, Erdogan personally. Plus, Erdogan needed to improve his image even domestically, not speaking about internationally, because he's been just in the middle of the very serious economic crisis. And all these negotiations can a little bit reattract attention to him. At the same time, it seems to me that the role of Turkey today is, first of all, a facilitator. They're trying to create conditions for the negotiations. That is not the formulator or even not the manipulator of the situation. So they are not proposing the certain articles what can be inside of the peace agreement, but just as a creating a space where to have the negotiations, Turkey is quite a good option, I would say. Speaking about Israel, Israel will not work. And there are many reasons for this. Honestly, I've even been very surprised to see Israel in the list of the guarantors, because the position of the official Israel, let's remember, within the last month was very suspicious. Some statements about that Ukraine needs to surrender or to make big compromises to Russia sounded really odd, considering that Israel themselves know what has been the fight for their independence. That's why definitely we can have two missions to Israel as the mediators, and that is very bad for the like even in the sphere of mediation. Switzerland or some neutral countries like this always can be the options, but at the same time, Geneva is usually becoming the place for negotiations just because there are international organizations there, the same as Vienna. So it's not the special role of the Switzerland or of Austria, it's more of the place about which we're talking about.
I do hope that this place will be rather The Hague or Nuremberg. But still, coming back to Turkey, would you please say anything about the passive, I would say, behavior of Turkey in the Black Sea region? Because they are very well known for their close connections with the Crimea. And going on with this, so to following up this question, why isn't Ankara still joining the sanctions against Russia?
From the very beginning, the Turkish position being that they would like to cooperate with both sides, except of the red lines like Crimean Tatars' freedoms, for example. But at the same time, they would try to balance as far as the relations with one country is not jeopardizing relations with another country. That being the official position of Ankara without changes. At the same time, we need to understand that the last 2 years, Turkey being in the very, very serious economic crisis. So they were really worrying about jeopardizing the situation even more. And Turkey is still dependent on the Russian energy sources. And they understood that they will not be able to survive the same way as many European countries can do. Tourism definitely is not the main, even that tourism definitely is quite a serious income for the state budget, but energy projects and nuclear projects, plus Syria. Don't forget about these issues. Syria is still an active conflict. And Syria is the place where Russian and Turkish interests really contradict each other. So in Ankara, at least experts with whom I spoke, they were really afraid that Russia can open the second front in Syria just to take off attention of Turkey.
And as for the southern part of Ukraine, what would you say, knowing that Russia is now totally controlling the Azov Sea and it seized the Black Sea at Kherson region? We can see that they're blocking any maritime and sea routes. So what could be the development of this situation, and why doesn't NATO react properly against the fact that we can even imagine that the Black Sea is just transforming into the Russian lake?
That's definitely quite a serious question, and we've been discussing it several days ago with the NATO officials that we wanted to see a little bit bigger activity of NATO in the Black Sea. However, there are certain developments, I would say. First of all, just several days ago, after the extraordinary summit that NATO leaders had in Brussels, they decided to open 4 additional battle groups. So what we already had in Baltics and in Poland, now that should be in Hungary, Slovakia, Romania, and Bulgaria. So Romania and Bulgaria is definitely strengthening exactly the Black Sea front. Also, we started to see the additional forces arriving to the US bases in Romania, and French airplanes, Rafales. That is for the monitoring of the situation. What we are lacking, it is Navy. And here it's really quite a problematic situation because Bulgaria is almost with incapable navy. Romania have quite a small navy that just recently started to develop and modernize, but that is not something serious yet. And Turkish navy, most of it being concentrated on the south, not on the north, so not in the Black Sea region. As a result, we can say that NATO countries are not controlling the Black Sea region as for now. Still, I hope that these 1 month being just the question for regrouping, and that we will see a little bit more developments and at least the thought-provoking initiatives. We know that US brought additional forces to Alexandroupolis, so to the Greek territories, but that is very close to the Black Sea. That's also that can help with the blocking of the Russian fleet, because let's remember that a lot of Russian ships are in the Mediterranean. And Turkey already made something that nobody could expect from them. They finally used the clauses of the Montreal Convention and prohibited these Russian ships to come to the Black Sea. And I would say that even that we were not talking a lot about this, it was not that public, but that was quite an important thing because all these ships were able to deliver missiles. And what we see now, for example, that big attack against the Vinnytsia airport, it happened from the Navy missiles from the ships. That's why that is so important to limit the number of the Russian ships in the Black Sea region.
But has Russia ever showed any subordination to any of the international prohibitions or treaties, or even a peace treaty, which could be the result of those plenty and multitude of rounds of negotiations? Maybe they won't just listen to Turkey.
Theoretically, Russia is really well known for violating or at least manipulating. I would say that Russians have very interesting relations with the international law. On the one hand, they really respect it, or at least they always cover by it. And their lawyers always try to find the loopholes in the different conventions. But at the same time, this manipulation is definitely not about fulfilling the obligations according to different treaties and conventions. However, when we speak about Montreal Convention, that is much more difficult because we are talking about the physical necessity to cross Bosphorus. It's not something that you can ignore. And you cannot just cross Bosphorus without agreement of the Turkish Navy. First of all, Turkish Navy is not weak, so they physically have the ability to stop you. Second, that is not 100 meters that you need to cross. Everybody who's been in Istanbul, you remember this long pass of Dardanelles and Bosphorus. So it's not that we wanted, we just passing. If they would like to do it without Turkish permission, it means start of the war between Russia and Turkey. And that's what the Russian Federation definitely doesn't want.
So, okay, we have seen another round of the negotiations, this time in Istanbul. There are official news that the next round will be again held online, beginning even with the 1st of April, so already now. What are your expectations of the next rounds? Is it much better to meet face-to-face, or online is working as well? And are we waiting for the final round, final meeting between the two presidents?
It seems to me that it's too early to speak about the meeting of two presidents because two presidents will come only when the certain draft will be on paper. However, sometimes definitely the personal meeting is better. you always have the certain trust, you have the possibility of the consultations just during the coffee, let's say, when two sides can just discuss and brainstorm something. But at the same time, it seems to me that after the last 2 years, we already used to the online consultations as well. They've been too many, and we already managed to have our own tips about it. At the same time, for me, the most important is probably who will be within the negotiating team. Because for me, that's really a problem now that we can't understand who is in charge of the Ukrainian team, why certain people and with which functioning they're within the negotiating team, because nobody saw any official document. Like, according to the procedures, if there are negotiations, it should be the decree of the president who are setting the list of the negotiators. And probably, especially in such war conditions, general public population in Ukraine should know why these particular people are members. And that's understandable why deputy minister, that's understandable why minister of defense is there. It can be some personal ideas or advisors to the president. Theoretically, that's logical. But the last time we saw a few new people that we even couldn't recognize, plus Mr. Charlie, who didn't have any formal positions for the last probably 8 years. And the person with quite a dubious reputation in the past and during these 8 years. So it seems to me that this would be more important who is in the delegation rather than is it online or offline.
Well, I do hope for the best still. Thank you so much for finding time to join us. And we do hope to hear some good news, both from you and from the negotiations. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.
Stand with Free Ukraine. Subscribe for our channel.